you remember that $6.2 billion accounting error that the Pentagon told us about? Well, Congress now has questions about that. How do they just screw up this spreadsheet so badly that a few billion dollars gets misappropriated? This story came out from the Pentagon, and this woman, Sabrina Singh, told us, just kind of, in this very nicely crafted, very tight statement, very quickly articulated, that it's just a couple $billion that they erroneously mislabeled the equipment that was going over to Zelensky and to Ukraine. And so some backstory before we hear from Sabrina, in case you missed this one. This came over from Reuters. There was literally an accounting error that was in the realm of about $3 billion, maybe $6.2 billion. And you start asking yourself, gosh, that's a lot of money. These are like not rounding errors, unless they are rounding errors. And we know that for the government, spending is not one of their high priorities for accountability. So this story came from Reuters. They tell us that the Pentagon found that it had overestimated the amount of funding for ammunition, missiles, and other equipment that it sent to Ukraine by $6.2 billion due to an accounting error. Right? We're going to hear Sabrina tell us about that. More than double the amount that was previously disclosed. Now, this was revised, right? This story keeps changing a little bit, which is why Congress is now demanding answers on this. They're like, what? The value of the accounting error was revised up from $3 billion that was first reported by Reuters in May. Now it's up to $6.2 billion. The result of assigning higher than warranted value on U.S. weaponry shipped to Ukraine. And we got real questions about this, because if they're playing around with the valuation of the equipment, maybe that gives them more leverage to say, oh no, that $100 million piece of whatever is really worth, no, that's like, what do we get that for? I don't know, like 20 million, right? All right, so it's like only 20 million. That means we've got an $80 million leftover budget of other stuff that we can continue to give them. So if they're playing around with the numbers and it's to the tune of billions of dollars, people have questions about that. Additional funding was uncovered as Pentagon officials researched the situation more thoroughly, and they clarified protocols for valuing equipment based on financial management and regulation. Now it's $6.2 billion breaks down to $3.6 billion for 2023, $2.6 billion for 2022. And Sabrina says the errors did not impact the size of the drawdown authority or the support for Ukraine. That's number one. We don't want to possibly interfere with that Ukraine money. So Congress is now responding. We're going to take a look at the letter. This is going actually to the Department of Defense from James Comer and other people in Congress. And we'll read through that letter. But Sabrina, she was here and she explained this position. And for some reason, my video is not added here. Let me see if I have it. Yes, I do. Let's see if we can get it loaded.
Following up from some announcements earlier this year, during the department's regular oversight of our execution of Presidential Drawdown Authority for Ukraine, we discovered inconsistencies in equipment valuation for Ukraine. In a significant number of cases, services used replacement costs rather than net book value, thereby overestimating the value of the equipment drawn down from U.S. stocks and provided to Ukraine. Once we discovered this misvaluation, the comptroller reissued guidance on March 31st, clarifying how to value equipment in line with the financial management regulation and DoD policy to ensure we use the most accurate of accounting methods.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you're properly valuing the car before you sell the car. I mean, if you sold a car to somebody and you were dishonest about the value of the car, and then you did something with that value, like wrote it off, or you didn't report it, or whatever the margin, whatever the transaction was, you were dishonest about it, that would be a problem, right? You might get audited, you might get charged with a crime for falsifying taxes and doing all sorts of stuff like this. But when it's billions of dollars and it's just the Pentagon and they're just like, oops, they just revised their numbers. And she just comes out and delivers a statement like it's nothing. It's like, and by the way, it doesn't interfere with our authority to give them any more billions.
We have confirmed that for FY23, the final calculation is $3.6 billion. And for FY22, it is $2.6 billion for a combined total of $6.2 billion.
Crazy.
These valuation errors in no way limit or restricted the size of any of our PDAs or impacted the provision of support to Ukraine.
Of course it didn't.
While the DoD retains the authority to utilize the recaptured PDA, this has no bearing on appropriated USAI or Ukraine PDA replenishment funding approved by Congress.
It's just crazy. I mean, that is such a massive amount of money. When you zoom out on these conversations and you think about how many billion-dollar companies are there, right, that are in, let's say, your state, or let's say even the country. And there's a lot of them, but they are big companies. They employ a ton of people. I mean, they're massive amounts of human capital and financial capital and technical capital, and they just are just off by a couple $billion. It's unfathomable. The only place where you could find this amount of incompetency and get away with it and nobody be fired, resigned, or even go go to jail over it is in the United States or in, let's say, incompetent government. It's just amazing. So Congress is now finally getting around to asking questions on this, and they're demanding a briefing. And this went over to the Honorable Lloyd from the Secretary of Defense. This one's coming from the Oversight Committee, and you can see this was sent July 7th, 2023. So they're still paying attention to it. We've got James Comer. He's over from the Committee on Oversight and Accountability, along with Glenn Grothman. He's on the Subcommittee of National Security, Border, and Foreign Affairs, copying the Democrats and other committees on this. They are referencing Government Accountability Office in some of the footnotes down here. Not a long letter, but it does go to Secretary Lloyd Austin. You may remember him from the COVID pandemic, where he wore multiple face masks and a face shield to protect himself while leading America with bravery. So the Committee on Oversight and Accountability is continuing to examine the federal government's U.S. taxpayer-funded, a lot of money, assistance to Ukraine. The committee is alarmed by the Pentagon's financial management practices, if you have any, and recent reporting about how it tracks weapons and material stockpiles. On June 20th, Pentagon spokesperson Sabrina Singh, the woman we just listened to, told reporters and the Defense Department that they massively overestimated the value of weapons that had sent to Ukraine by $6.2 billion over the past 2 years. Now, this comes after the DoD announced a $3 billion accounting error in May 2023. All the slush fund money is now being accounted for, I guess. The Committee on Oversight requests a briefing to understand how this most recent, quote, accounting error occurred and how the DoD is ensuring that stockpiles vital for our national security are being properly replenished. Are they sure that they know how many tanks we have, or are they too focused on name tags with appropriate pronouns? Since 2014, the U.S. has invested more than $39.7 billion in security assistance for the Ukrainian people, $40 billion. And I got to imagine it's even more than that. I mean, that's just the accounting from Congress. U.S. security cooperation with Ukraine, May 9, 2023. Number is a little bit old. And I think they just announced, what, another 100 million yesterday? So 36.9 billion of those funds have been provided since Russia invaded in 2022. 21 billion has been sent to Ukraine through the Presidential Drawdown Authority, which allows the president to provide direct military aid to Ukraine by sending military hardware out of the United States-owned stockpiles. Here's another one. Yeah, Congress approved 113 billion. I knew it was way higher than that. So to date, about 40 billion has gone over, but much more has been approved. There's still a big chunk of money that apparently has been approved by Congress. So they say the president used the Presidential Drawdown Authority on 37 occasions. It's like every morning we wake up. What do you want to do today, Mr. President? Well, I'd love some ice cream and my checkbook. Zelensky was in my dreams again. Let's send him a check. So they're going to provide military assistance over to Ukraine. The Department of Defense recently discovered this accounting error. $6.2 billion. Yet another example of failures within the DoD's financial management systems. Maybe it's a failure. Maybe it's just totally willful. And it raises more concerns about the DoD's ability to protect taxpayer funds, which they do not care about at all. Financial management at the DoD has been on the U.S. Government Accountability Office's high risk list since 1995. Oh my gosh. So they've been on this list of agencies that might be just burning money hand over fist. What's the list for? What do you need a list? This list has been around for a long time now. And it's going to turn into what, action? No, they're just going to be on the list. They're like, you're on a high risk list. They're like, we don't care. We've been on there for 30 years. Additionally, the DoD has been unable to produce an accurate assessment of its spending or physical assets. An issue this committee has been investigating, and you'll never get answers on that. Really, because the DoD, the military industrial complex, FBI, DOJ, CIA, I think really the bureaucratic states largely in control of the country. So when Congress asks for something, they just say, we'll get it to you. We're on a high risk list for 30 years. You want an accounting? Not going to get it. And when Congress, bangs the table and threatens to withhold their funding, does that ever happen? Ever? No. So they just keep doing what they're going to do. Ensuring the DoD is able to properly account for their assets and equipment is vital to ensuring military readiness and effectiveness, not only for our Ukrainian allies, but for our own services. The committee seeks to understand what caused this so-called accounting error, how the DoD discovered it, all great questions, what is being done to prevent future errors of this magnitude, and additionally, the committee would like to know how the Pentagon plans to use the $6.2 billion in U.S. taxpayer funds that is now suddenly available due to the discovery of this accounting error. They just magically found that extra credit card. Oh, we gave them all of the bad bad equipment. Oh, yeah, those were like hand-me-downs. We were going to donate to those to Goodwill anyways and get a tax write-off. So now we can give them the good stuff. As demonstrated by previous conflicts the U.S. has engaged in, spending money quickly with little diplomatic strategy, just dumping it into foreign wars for 20 years, has resulted in overspending and high risks of corruption. The committee seeks insight into what accountability mechanisms are in place with the DOJ to ensure that taxpayer funds are spent properly and similar errors do not occur in the future. Therefore, we request a staff-level briefing on this matter later this month, and to schedule, please give our office a call. Remember, we are the House. We can conduct oversight under House Rule 10. Thank you in advance for your cooperation to this inquiry. Your friends, James Comer, Glenn Grothman, from the United States House of Representatives on the Oversight Committee. So we'll see if Lloyd Austin responds. They'll probably take this letter and say, oh my gosh, you reminded us. We found another error. 10 billion more for Ukraine. So our incompetent DOD can't even manage their checkbooks, let alone an exit from war, let alone a new war. We're going to see how two fronts works out for them. Hopefully it doesn't happen. But Congress demanding answers. We'll see if they get them.